sermon title for this morning is, and I'm going to explain this if the title might not be as clear as it should be. The title is Jesus or Babylon, Our Spiritual Diet. And this is June 21st, 2025. So what does that mean when with my title that Jesus or Babylon is our spiritual diet? So we have a choice to make whether we're going to feed off Jesus Christ or we are going to feed off spiritual Babylon. And I'm going to explain what this spiritual Babylon is. And I'm going to be using the book of Daniel. For this morning, we're going to start with chapter 1 of the book of Daniel. And to make sure that we understand and what Daniel himself wrote as God told him. I'm going to start with first looking at Daniel chapter 2 and verse 28. Now here Daniel is talking to King Nebuchadnezzar. He's the king of what? Babylon. Keep that in mind. We're looking at the literal Babylon and also the spiritual implication of what Babylon represents. So here Daniel is telling the King Nebuchadnezzar, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Keep that thought in mind. That will be what? In the latter days. The next verse is 8:17. 8:17. And 8:17 reads, so he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, this is another vision that Daniel was having. Understand, talking to Daniel, understand, Son of Man, that the vision refers to when? The time of the end. And I'm giving you two verses. Now I'm going to go to chapter 12. Keep this in mind. This is extremely important. Otherwise, we'll miss the whole significance of our message for this morning. What God is giving Daniel and telling Daniel, and this is a little book, a small book. And what God is telling Daniel, that his message, even though it had application all the way back, and then from Nebuchadnezzar, from the captivity and the children of Israel brought into Babylon, from that time until the end. The book of Daniel is a prophetic book, and it gives you all the way to the end. But it's very specific, and we're going to see what this means. It's very specific that we are to understand the book of Daniel in the light of the end time, which means to say that we will get an understanding of the book of Daniel that might never have occurred in any previous generation, but is applying to us living at this stage upon whom the end of the ages has come. So I'm going now to chapter 12, and I'm going to start from verse 1. Then at that time Michael shall stand up, and I'm not going to go into trying to define who Michael is here. And at that time Michael shall stand up, that great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. So what it is telling us, that something is going to happen like it never ever happened in the history of the world. And at that time, your people shall be delivered. Now, I'm going to show that if we are looking at some of these things in a very literal way, we are missing the point. Who are these people of God that is being spoken to here had its local application to the Jewish people, but don't miss to and don't see that this also applies to people living at the end time, before the second advent of Jesus Christ. So your people did have its application in its context to the children of Israel. But a true Jew is one who is not in the flesh. A true Jew is the one who is a Jew in his heart. Keep that in mind. I know a lot of us have been conditioned to believe something that was not promoted by Jesus, but we have taken things from the Bible that is not referring to literal Jew. It's talking of spiritual Jew. So here, at that time, your people shall be delivered, and we are saying, concerning the end time, everyone who's found written in the book. Okay? So does this just apply to the Jewish people? No. It applies across the board to every human being that has their name written in the book of life, which means to say that, like we had a Bible study, that these people, through the revelation of Jesus Christ, know God the Father the way he should be known. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth. So when is this referring to? It's referring to the time of the end, when many people that have died and are sleeping in the dust of the earth shall wake, some to everlasting life and some to everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament. What is that referring to? That is referring to people living at the end time that will understand God's agape love, share it and live it. They will shine, not in a negative way where you are promoting yourself and shining and trying to promote yourself as a preacher or a teacher or an evangelist or whatever. If you are doing that, then you have completely and totally failed in understanding what it is saying. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to where? To righteousness, like stars forever and ever. What the pastor shared with us this morning, that is applying here to what he was sharing with us. The message, the truth of God's love, of God's character. You are shining like the what? The brightness of the firmament. And that is the message that is to be given to the world. Like stars forever and ever. Now verse 4. But you, Daniel, shut up the words of what words? The book of Daniel. Shut up the words and seal the book. Which means to say, doesn't mean to say from the time Daniel wrote, from the time he was in Babylon, the book is sealed and nobody is going to understand. It has its historical application, but we read very clearly that there's going to be a deeper understanding of the book of Daniel from ever before. Okay? Because that's what it says. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. So until the time of the end is where, if we are living right here before the second advent of Jesus Christ, the book of Daniel will have an exponential revelation and understanding that was never there before. And we're going to see, as I'm going to progress in this, in the Sabbath class and in the sermons that I'll be giving, the preaching that I'll be doing from here, I'm going to be covering all of this in the time that I will have, okay? Many shall run to and fro, and what's going to happen? Knowledge shall increase. Now, dear ones, tell me this. Compared to even 150 years ago, compared to 100 years ago, and then think, even compared to 10 years ago, how has knowledge exponentially increased? It's mind-boggling the way knowledge is exponentially increasing. in every facet. But is this knowledge also applicable to the understanding of the scriptures? Yes. So knowledge will increase. And this knowledge that will increase will involve what? And those who turn many to righteousness, many to God's agape love, many to giving the revelation of God's agape love. Okay? And knowledge shall increase. So keep that in mind. As much as scientifically and every other way knowledge is increasing, knowledge will increase in the understanding of the Holy Scriptures. Then I'm skipping all the rest of the verses, and I'm going to verse 9. And he said, go your way, the angel that spoke to Daniel, and he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed. And again, I'm making sure that you understand it doesn't mean to say that the book of Daniel was not going to be understood from the time he wrote it in its historical context, but he's applying to the time of the end. It will be sealed in the sense that the understanding that we are going to get before the second advent is going to be exponentially different to ever before. Closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Again, many what? Shall be purified. Purified in what? Think this, dear ones. And unto 2,300 days, Daniel 8:14, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Who are the sanctuaries? Who are the temple of God? We are. So something is going to happen that we will be purified, we'll be cleansed. And how are we going to be purified and how are we going to be cleansed? In the understanding of God's character. That's what it's talking of here, dear one. That we will know God's agape. And on the basis of when you know God's agape, we shall be purified, made what? White. What does that mean? That means to say there's not going to be any spot in any one of us that belong to the domain of the devil. We will be white and pure. In which way? Remember the foot washing and what Jesus said, you are all clean except for one person, was Judas. Then he also said, some of you are clean already, but you just need your feet to be washed here. And the feet washing was because the words, Jesus said, because the words that I have spoken to you, you are all clean. So every one of us, through the words that Jesus is speaking, what has happened? We are made white and what? Refined. But the wicked, those that reject God's agape love, those that reject God's character of agape love, those that don't want to live by it, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. Why? Because you choose to go the wrong way. You are not having Jesus as your final and true revelation of God the Father. What happens? None of the wicked shall understand. That means to say you'll go deeper and deeper in your wrong understanding of God. The wise shall understand. Okay, dear ones, here we go now. Chapter 1 of Daniel. Note what chapter 1 of Daniel is teaching us. When Daniel is writing and he's saying in chapter 1 of verse 1, in the third year of the reign of King Jehoiakim, of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Verse 2. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, Nebuchadnezzar's hand, with some of, pay particular attention to this portion, some of the what? Articles of the house of God. Some of the articles from the house of God that was in Jerusalem. And what were those articles? We know they were the utensils of the different facets, the lights, the candlestick, all of that was there. Some of these were taken, okay? Some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, which is Babylon, to the house of his God. So what Nebuchadnezzar did from the temple of Jerusalem, he took articles and brought it into the house of his God, and he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. So what does all this mean? How does all of this apply to us living here now? So these articles that were in God's house in Jerusalem, it states the house of God, was taken out and brought into this pagan house. There is these literal articles brought in to the king of Nebuchadnezzar's temple. That means that some or most of the people will be doing what? They will have a mixture of God's message with a mixture of what? The devil's message. The temple that belongs to the devil and the temple that belongs to God. And that mixture is what is being spoken of here. And you'll say, well, how far, where are you going with this? Otherwise, there's no significance to this. Because the significance to all of this says what? It applies to when? Time of the end. So at the time of the end, we have to make sure that there's no mixture in any one of us. The message for the Bible study. Agape love is what? Pure. Agape love does not have some mixture from God's temple and some mixture from the pagan temple. And I'm going to confirm this for us. I'm going to really confirm this for us, that this is what is being stated. Verse 3. Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men whom there was no blemish, but good looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach. All of these from Jerusalem, Jews will be brought into the king's palace that they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans, the Babylonian message, the Babylonian system. And the king appointed for them a daily provisions. Please pay attention to this now. The king, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and some of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. And here now we are told that were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. 4 of these young men were specially chosen to be like holding leadership position in the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar. So here, pay particular attention to this. These young men, and we'll see how Daniel words it, they were to what? Eat of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank. I'm going to cover this as to what this means. The wine that he drank and the delicacies that the king Nebuchadnezzar was eating. Extremely significant. Keep in mind what we looked at, the utensil brought into where? Into Nebuchadnezzar's pagan god temple, the devil's temple, from God's temple in Jerusalem. So keep that in mind. Here now we're going to address what is these delicacies of Nebuchadnezzar, the food and the wine that Nebuchadnezzar drank. Okay? Verse 8. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. What did he didn't want to do? Defile himself. Defile himself with what? We're going to see what? With the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine. So Daniel chose not to eat of the king's delicacies, the king's food, nor drink of the king's wine. And can you imagine what it could have been? It would have been the best food and the best wine in the nation, or for that matter, in the world. But Daniel chose not to take part in eating the king's delicacies nor drinking of the king's wine. So what the heck has this got to do with us? Ozzie, what are you talking about? So the food applied to them, the drinking applied to them, and you spoke and said that the book of Daniel clearly is stating that it has application upon the people living in the latter days, at the end time, before the second advent of Jesus Christ. So what has all this got to do with what you are propagating from here? We'll see. What is this delicacies of the king and the wine of the king, which he drank, okay? Therefore, he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. So now he talks to the chief person that Nebuchadnezzar picked to take care of these kids here, the young people. Verse 9. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord, the king, who has appointed your food and drink. The king has appointed these group of people, or for in particular to Daniel, his food and his drink, the king's delicacies and the king's wine. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young who are of your age? What he's saying, that if you don't eat of the king's delicacies and don't drink of his wine, your face is going to reflect that there's something wrong. And then what happens? I'll be in trouble. Because the God has appointed, the king has appointed me to make sure that you guys eat his delicacies and drink his wine. Verse 11. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Okay? Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The four of them. This is what Daniel now tells the chief of the eunuchs. Please test your servants for what? 10 days. And let them give us vegetable to eat and water to drink. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. People living at the end time, what's going to be happening? They'll eat vegetables and do what? Drink water. Oh. So every person that is not a vegetarian, oh, so you are meat eaters? You are not a vegetarian. There it says, for the end time. Don't get worried, don't get scared, don't think I've really gone down the deep end. I will explain to you what this means. But the significance is of profound importance. You only eat what? Vegetables, and you do what? Drink what? Water. No wine, no juice, nothing. You eat vegetables and drink water. So what is all this got to do? And I know a lot of people are vegetarian because they come to this passage and say, there you go. God appointed Daniel to be a vegetarian, and Daniel was a vegetarian. He didn't eat any meat, nothing. He just ate vegetables and drank water. And if you want to take it literally, there's a literal application to do, but I'm not promoting any of that literal application. I'm focused here to make sure that we understand what is being stated. The 10 days. You want to know what the 10 days applies to? I just want us to look and keep in mind, we have just finished reading verse 12 because it says, please stand your servants for what? 10 days. So imagine if you're just eating the king's food and drinking his wine for 10 days and you weren't eating the king's food and drinking the king's wine for 10 days and all the others continued eating. Do you really think, it's a bit far-stretched, isn't it? That in 10 days is going to have such a huge impact that you're going to look so different to everybody else? Is that what it's trying to teach us here? Think. Doesn't make sense, does it? So what's the significance of this for us living at the end time? For this, I want us to look at Numbers. Numbers chapter 14. Numbers chapter 14 and verse 34. Numbers 14 and verse 34. We're going to look at two verses in what all this means. Numbers chapter 14 and verse 34. I'm reading. According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days for each year, 40 days for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. So here is set out a principle. Doesn't have an application all the time because we also know 1,000 years represents a day too in Genesis, at the creation week. But here it is talking of a prophetic timeline, okay? So keep this in mind. And then now I want us to look at Ezekiel chapter 4. And the reason I'm doing this is because of what we're going to be looking at next. Ezekiel chapter 4 and verse 6. And when you have completed them, lie again on your right side. Then you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. Again, the principle is laid out here. 1 day. I have laid on you a day for a year. So that principle applies, a day for a year. So here, when Daniel is asking that for what? 10 days, he doesn't eat any of the king's delicacies, nor drinks the king's wine, but only thing he does is eats vegetable and water. For 10 days. We laid the principle out 10 days, 1 day for a year. So there's something involved for us living, if we are right here at the end of time, and I believe we are, 10 years has been given where we will not eat of the king's delicacies nor drink the king's wine. The king's delicacies, dear ones, I showed it. All those temple stuff was brought here. Keep that in mind. So the king's delicacies is referring to the Babylonian teachings, the Babylonian system, the Babylonian message of what? Of the God that the Babylonians were worshipping. And what is the wine? If I go to Revelation, let's make sure we clarify this. Go to Revelation chapter 17. Revelation chapter 17. To make sure that we have understood this, I'm going to be taking a few more minutes than normal, okay? Revelation chapter 17. I'm going to read from verse 1. Revelation 17, verse 1. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot. This is talking of spiritual Babylon. Okay? So the spiritual Babylon is a harlot who sits on many waters. So what is when it sits on many waters, what are these waters? Revelation again tells us what are these waters. Okay? Revelation 17:15 tells us, then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So symbolically, I hope I'm not going above you all. The waters represent humanity. Clearly, the Bible itself has taught us this. The water represents to every nation, people, multitude, nations, and tongues, all of humanity. Okay? Come, I will show the judgment of great who sits on many waters, which means to say this system is sitting on what? Every human being. Every human being is caught up in this system from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We think that we are pure, that we are white, that we are unblemished. But as long as we don't believe in God's agape love, as long as we don't see God's agape love through the revelation of the cross, because the cross revealed the Father, then what is happening? We are not worshiping the true God. We can be sitting in church, we can be keeping the Sabbath, but we're not worshiping the true God. But in this blindness, God is not holding it against us. But at the end, before the second advent of Jesus Christ, 10 years is given for us to make sure that we are feeding and drinking of only one person. That's the person of Jesus Christ. Nobody else. I am going to say the 10 years that I'm referring to here. Dear ones, think, and I'm going to ask a question. We're all here. We're all alive. In this little while, something happened on the face of this earth that applied to every human being living on planet Earth. Anyone dare to answer my question? I don't want Denise to say a word. Anybody else would like to answer this question of mine? What happened just in the recent past that has had application to every human being on the face of this earth? Go ahead, John Simons. John Mercer, sorry.
Okay, COVID-19.
The brother has spoken. The brother has spoken. Nothing has ever in my lifetime seen anything that has affected every human being on planet Earth, irrespective of wherever they are living. Second World War, First World War, whatever it was, did not affect every human being living on the planet Earth. COVID was the first time in our generation, in our lifetime, that has affected every human being on the face of the earth. Every government in every country, irrespective of wherever they were, the government played a huge role in this COVID-19. And it started when? At the latter part of 2019. And it kicked in full, slowly and slowly. All kinds of restrictions, all kinds of what? force, and if you didn't conform, what was happening? We know. We've been exposed to this. You had to wear a mask. You had to do this. And if you didn't get vaccinated, you couldn't work. And some stores, if you didn't have the mask on, and they might have even introduced in the flying. If you're traveling, you couldn't travel unless you had the shots. This had universal application. Before Jesus comes, there will be a universal application where, pardon me, we are going to be forced to conform to whatever the global agenda is. And when we're going to conform to whatever the global agenda is, pardon me, we will what? Conform to eating the king's food, the king's delicacies, and drinking the king's wine. And we are not to be doing that. We are supposed to make sure that we don't do that. Go ahead, John Mercer.
There's another agenda that the government has, and it's climate change.
Yes, that's one of them. That's one of them. But what is happening right now, dear ones, in the light of what we studied in the Sabbath class, and I don't have time now to go and give all the verses. We'll be studying this in my Bible studies. When I'm going to take my Bible classes, we're going to be studying this. That this climate change is just one aspect of what is going on. This whole thing that we are seeing right now that is happening in the world, of this killing, I can give you Bible verses to prove that any kind of a death that we are involved with and are sanctioning and promoting, that belongs to Satan, not to God. And people are justifying killing other people in the name of what? Their God. Whatever God they are worshipping, they are promoting violence and killing in the name of their God. But the God Jesus Christ revealed, the God that died on Jesus that died on the cross, was giving you the revelation of the true agape of God. And the true agape of God will die himself. The true agape God will die himself, then what? Kill even one human being. Because the Bible says that the blood is in the what? See? So when we kill any person, but we are not doing God's work.